Okay, so I'd like to welcome all of you once again. A few more people have joined us to Somerset and to this really important lecture, bearing in mind what's been happening in the UK this year and what's happening in lots of places around the world. We really need to know a lot about Asian hornets, and not only their biology and their behavior, but also what it's like if you've got Asian hornets around you and if you're needing to try and keep bees and deal with Asian hornets at the same time. And our speaker tonight is somebody that's had that experience for the last few years, and we're going to learn all about that. So you might even want to take notes about what you're going to do and what sort of plans you're going to be thinking of. So our speaker tonight is Richard, who is Richard Noel, who is based in Brittany in France. And Richard, thank you so much for joining us here in Somerset. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us. And we're all really looking forward to hearing what you've got to say and learning all sorts from you. So over to you whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much, Lynn. I'm going to obviously share my screen first. I hope you can all hear me. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So I'm just going to first of all share my screen when I can, but I just need to wait a second because I can't press play on my Zoom because it's behind the, just bear with me a second. Here we go. Okay. Do we have a good screen there?
Yeah, that's
everyone's okay, good. So I've called this talk 19 Years of Asian Hornets, How the French Cope. I've done this talk the last 3 times now, and I've actually modified it a little bit each time because every time I do a talk, I find something in it that I forget to add. But what I'm going to hopefully leave you with tonight is my experiences, a story of how last year was a disaster and how I've recovered, so I can give you some kind of hope and context of what is the right thing for you to do. There's no right or wrong for this, but there's a general consensus now that's emerging after all these years of us treating or dealing with Asian hornets. Unfortunately, it looks like the UK are going to have a dose of it, or they've had a dose of it this year. If we don't kind of put things into place this winter and get a good control next spring, if there's any overwintered queens, that's when your problems are going to start. But I'm going to explain all that in this talk. And I just hope I'm going to give you some shock and awe pictures like we like to do. And you're going to go, is that real? I can tell you this is how my apiaries were last year. So first of all, as usual, I'm going to give you just a quick introduction about me. I'm going to play these worrying pics and videos, and then I'm going to explain what made 2022 so catastrophic in Brittany. And it was a disaster for us. So and then we're going to talk about the current strategies and latest thinking. And are we doing all we can? And then we're going to be doing questions. Now, I will be available for questions after, but we may go into the chat after that. If there's enough questions and people want to carry on, we'll have a break and we'll come back. So I'm going to be around. Write your questions down. I'll do what I can, but I'm hoping you're going to have most of those questions answered. And I'll give you your homework to do while you're here, because there's lots of things I'm going to tell you to go and do when you've gone away from this video, this presentation. Sorry. So as usual, a little bit about me, just so you've got some context of where I am. Okay, what I do, I live in a really nice
I've lost sound.
He's on mute.
And me.
Okay, can everybody hear me now? Yeah, are we still good?
Yeah, back now.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, sorry about that, but I just had a thing saying I've been muted. Okay, so I live in Brittany, this classic stone cottage. I'm really lucky. I've got a great garden. I live in a beautiful place to keep bees. And this is where, to give you all into context where I live, I'm actually about 20 miles from St. Malo, so I live kind of, well, where you can see, and we do have the influence of the English Channel, just like being in Cornwall or the West Country, a lot of wet and damp winters, which we just had the last week of after the storm 2 weeks ago. So there you go. My apiaries are mostly rural, so we get some good spring and summer flowers, giving a wide variety of pollens and 2 main nectar flows. And we're situated also near small villages and hamlets that give more diverse pollens. You know, people go out and buy shrubs that flower at different times. So that really helps us because the population is increasing in our area. That's me in the little blue dot. And you can just see I've got a valley all around me, but there's also loads of valleys. I mean, I suppose it's very much like Wales or Somerset. It's kind of the similar kind of setup we've got here. So my current operation, going into the winter this year, I've got 200 production hives and 130 nucleus colonies. And this is the hives I use. I don't use the Mini Plus mating as from this year. I've actually just finished using them. I'm actually getting rid of them in my production because it didn't suit my needs because I'm not raising queens to sell. But I do use the 10 frame Dadant hives and I do use the 6 frame Dadant nucleus hives because I've now kind of regrouped on my production to everything being on the same frame because I've decided to get out of using the Mini Plus because it just wasn't working for my production. So it's just a bit of a background. What I do, as I said, we have 2 main nectar flows, and in early April, we get the first spring flow, and it lasts till about mid-May. We're about 2 weeks behind you guys. Loads of blackthorn, hawthorn, apples, cherries, and miles of rape. If you look at this photo, just above that, this massive yellow, you'll see another field there and another field there, and there's another one in the distance there. You are never, ever far away from rapeseed in Brittany. It's everywhere. They grow it really well. They seem to have got around the mite, not the mite, what's it called? There's I can't remember the bug that plagues a lot of people in the UK, but they seem to get around that, and we have really good crops.
Beetle.
So we get some good spring honey. This was spring last year, sorry. This spring was pretty poor because I lost a lot of colonies, as you'll find out. But last year was a really good spring. And then we have the May-June gap, which you guys have, but you have more of a June gap. But it's not actually a real gap. We just have pollen, and we don't have not much of a dearth, but not much nectar. So it's a time when we're running around like crazy. We're making splits if the colonies need it. We're getting step ladders out and going into the shrubs and trees like everybody else is as well. And we're then trying to rectify those swarm colonies and getting them ready for the summer flow. So we have a summer flow, but we also make nukes as well if we can in April and May, as I said, when we start to get those bees swarming. We try and do swarm control. Our swarm control is mostly requeening with new queens and timely intervention to hopefully knock those cells down. And if we find a queen that's going to go, we'll just make a nuke of that and let them requeen naturally. It's kind of a mix. You just have to put the work in April, May, and June to get a good crop in the summer, like everybody else. So then we have this lovely summer flow, mid-June to mid-July every year, predominantly chestnut and bramble flowers, and it can be really good. Obviously, the chestnut honey is a much higher value, but it's not quite as strong as pure chestnut that you might get from Spain because it's actually a little bit darker, and we have. But sorry, it's actually like dulled down a bit, but it is obviously a dark color. But it's like a nice, well, a lighter dark, if you know what I mean, because the bramble softens it down and it actually makes a much better flavor. So you actually got a really good product. So that's the kind of thing we get at the end of the summer. You see the Dadant hives there on top of sort of Dadant supers on top of the hives. We get really good, some really nice frames. We don't always get this, and obviously I'm going to show you pictures of my best crops because that's what everybody does. I also get to go to the buckwheat. This year I had, I think, 26 colonies on the buckwheat, and I think I got about just over 460 kilos of honey from the buckwheat, which was great. It didn't grow very high this year because we had easterly winds, which I'll tell you all about how it helped us keep the Asian hornets down because it blew them all over to you. But we had a really good crop of the buckwheat because it just came good at the right time. So, and also I get to make some nukes. That's my nuke yard. You might have seen in my YouTube videos. I raise between 80 and 130 nukes every year because it's a way of controlling swarms, and it's free bees. It's the sustainability I build into my beekeeping operation, and it means I get nukes to renew the following year. If I have losses, it gives me nukes to sell and also to increase my beekeeping operation if I have any extra that I want to put back into the system. So let's talk about the Asian hornet. That's what I'm here for tonight. I want you to go away with some idea of what you're up against. and it is a threat to bees and the surrounding ecosystem. And that's the thing. It's not just your bees. You've got to go away with that tonight, that this is something that isn't just really beekeepers. Just to refresh you, in France, we call it the frelon asiatique. Obviously, it's the common hornet, Vespa crabba on the right, and the Asian hornet on the left. You'll notice the abdomen is a lot smaller in the Asian hornet, and it's much darker. And obviously, the biggest thing of all is the yellow legs in the Asian hornet, and that's the easiest giveaway. You will, in the spring, you'll also hear the common hornet well before you see it. It'll be like a bus with wings flying around the apiary, and you can just ignore her. That's nice to see. But when you hear that, you will hear the queen common hornets much earlier in the year. If you happen to be in your apiaries in March, you might start to see one attracted. So I'm going to talk about that as well. Just to give you some context, remember we've had the Vespa mandriana, which is the murder hornet coined by the Americans, just to show you the different types. And they are much bigger even than the common hornet and the Asian hornet. They are, and they had an outbreak in Washington State in the USA, but they think they've got on top of that. And it's a good example of where they can get together and control an invasive species. But it might only just be once they've controlled it. Now, who knows? They might come back in another state. The problem is we are flying all over the world. We're taking containers everywhere. And this is a problem we had in France. The other hornet that is now turning up in France is the Vespa orientalis. This has been seen right in the south of France. It's not as invasive as the Vespa velutina, the Asian hornet, but it's still another threat to bees. But this one nests in the ground, so it's actually generally a lot easier to track and to treat. So that's just to give you some context on the different types of hornets that may or may not show appearance in the next few weeks. Sorry, no, I hope the next few weeks, in the next few years. So I'm sure you've all seen this life cycle. You can see on the right-hand side, January, February, March, and I put a line in as to where we are trapping. We start here in really early to mid-February is our key time to get trapping, to get all the traps out in the apiaries, to bait them up, because that's when those young queens are going to be leaving the hibernation from the previous autumn and in November. So I'm going to show you later on, you'll see there is an autumn trapping time, which this year was very successful for us. We managed to trap an awful lot of Asian hornets at the last minute. We just have that 1 or 2 week period where the weather goes pants, you've got your hornet traps out, and there's a little bit of warmth for 1 or 2 days, and you get loads of emerging queens that just end up going into the traps. So these two are key to controlling your hornet problem, and you're going to have to concentrate on that and focus on that next year. But the rest of the time, the whole point of this diagram as well is to show you that your beekeeping season is done by July, but that's when the hornets really get going. So you can do everything, we can all relax and go, oh, there's not many hornets around, all seems fine. And suddenly in July, bang, it starts. And that's just when your bees are thinking about making winter bees. And that's where the problem is. So I'm going to run this little video. Lynn has got a copy of this. It just gives you some idea of where and how the Asian hornet came into France and is now obviously everywhere. There's not much we can do about it. We've been told there's silver bullet traps coming out or pheromone traps that are going to be really good, but we're still waiting for them to appear, and nothing is on the horizon. I would say it's like Varroa. We're always told about these new things that are going to work, but the truth is nothing actually seems to work that well, apart from what I'm going to tell you, cultural control. So this is an Asian hornet's nest in the spring. We're going to talk about the life cycle a little bit. This is the starter nest from an Asian hornet, and this was in one of my friend's doorways, asked me to come and have a look at it, didn't know what it was. And there is an Asian hornet queen inside. She's going about making that nest on her own. And this is the key time. You've got to focus on this, because this is when this queen is most vulnerable. And all the other queens in the spring, they are on their own. They are doing an amazing job. This is an incredibly dynamic insect that is capable of raising an entire population from one insect. And you goes from that to a massive nest by the end of the summer. And then that massive nest will then also produce loads of queens. So this is the perfect time in terms of money and observation, everything else, to find these nests or to at least trap queens in the spring, because she is on her own and she is looking for food. She is hungry. She will be out there. She is trappable. There's you can see in the comb there, there's the larvae of different stages. On the, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but on the top sort of middle left, there's the young eggs that she's laid, and then you've got the larvae, and this white is actually the foam I sprayed into the nest that has virtually disappeared. But these are kind of grubs that were, I couldn't give you an age on this nest, but I'd say it's probably 18, 20 days maybe. It's taken her that long to raise that, and they're kind of now developing. So that this queen would have got away and made a nest and then made a bigger nest as a secondary nest. We call this in France a nid primaire, or a primary nest. I'm sure you know this, but then it will become a secondary nest when they migrate after she's raised enough workers, and then she'll stay in the nest in the new location and lay where all the other workers do their job. So this was a starter nest in a nuke box. You've got to be careful with old equipment, but also you can use it to your advantage. Old equipment seems to attract Asian hornet queens in the spring. I got stung twice on the wrist because I picked up this nuke. You see I'm wearing a glove here, so I went and put my gloves on, but this was a primary nest that they must have vacated afterwards, because 2 hornets stung me on the wrist and then they just disappeared, but they were just hanging around, and for some reason I got stung. I don't know why, but that's just to give you some example. That's just a straightforward empty nuke box. And then, as I said, they grow into a huge nest like this. This is actually a small nest. Excuse the handsomeness of the guy behind. He's just doing the job holding the nest up. But that gives you some example of what you're up against. You see here, there's the layers inside the nest of what we call the combs or the brood. And this was taken out of a tree. This was taken out of a tree in about after the first frost, but it was still incredibly active. And when it was destroyed and treated with a pesticide, it was like full of Asian hornets servicing that nest, because we believe they were going to obviously make queens. So we think we stopped this one, but what about the other 30 in the surrounding area or more or whatever? What I'm saying is this is just an example of the size, and you can see how large those nests get from that tiny first cup. I say, so what you got to remember is Asian hornets cause colony stress. And I talked about that time in July when you have nothing before and suddenly there's a load of hornets outside your colonies. So at the same time, there's often a dearth, which happened last year. Hornets hunting or hawking are only a sign of one problem. The biggest issue is the forager bees that are not returning with food and message to the colony. And as the season goes on, the colony really gets checked and pushed back because it's not receiving pollen, it's not receiving food, it's not receiving messages from other bees because they're just not coming back. And then the colony gets under stress. The queens stop laying and there's not enough winter bees produced to go through the winter. So that is the key problem. We can all deal with Asian hornets to a certain extent in front of the colonies, but the underlying problem is what's happening elsewhere. It's not just in front of your colonies. You've got to think outside the box, because Asian hornets are coming to your colonies because they are not finding the insects that they are expecting to find elsewhere. Okay. You might have seen my YouTube videos. I showed a picture of a large Asian hornet's nest right in front of my house, right in front, 20 meters from my house. I had no idea it was there. And I had an apiary at my home, literally 70, 80 meters away. I would be pushed to find an Asian hornet in front of those hives, even with that Asian hornet nest in full operation. Because there was so much other insects in that year, it didn't really impact my bees. And that's the problem we're finding. You don't often see the nest because you can't see a passage of bees in front of your apiary, so you can't track it. It's not just at your apiary. Asian hornets will predate everywhere they can, and your apiary gets predated later on when there's nothing else around. Stress, just remember, stress is on the colony. Okay, so this is what happens. You know about this. We're all beekeepers here. It's the old bees that aren't returning, and they're not giving those messages to other bees to where to go to find the food because they're never coming back. The other thing is queens that do summer mating, what do we call it? Supersedure, sorry. They aren't able to supersede because there's no drones. because they stop producing drones, because what happens when the colony is under stress? They boot the drones out. So that's the first to go. But then the drones that are left all get eaten, because what is a drone? It's a dopey bloke walking around with nothing to do. And that's a prime target for a hornet. That is like the most juiciest thing it could ever want to eat. So they go, and then there's no returning queens. So your queen goes off to mate. She might get caught as well, but she's not even mating well either. And I'm talking about a situation where you've got a lot of hornets, but that's what happened to us last year. So this is one of those videos. This is Asian hornets in front of one of my apiaries under full attack. And I'll leave you watch. So this is what I find. This is what I found when I went to my apiaries in mid-August last summer. So what I want you to look at is I want you to look at the bees on the left-hand side here, underneath the handle there. And I want you to ask kind of, why are they doing that behavior when there's hornets? Why don't they go inside? So what the bees are doing is they are actually giving returning bees a way home. It's their kind of slight mechanism. They want to help the bees return back to the nest. So they will try and help those returning bees, because there's enough bees in the colony. The colony on the extreme left, okay, the closest one, that is a strong colony still. And I've got green hornet doors up, and I'll explain that after. But the thing is, those bees are kind of dealing with it at the moment, but they're probably not getting any feed. So just to point out, you can actually tell, I can tell when I go into an apiary and suddenly the hornets have arrived and they're suddenly moved to a new area, and I've got a whole lot under attack, because my bees start to do this. And it's an absolute signature of the hornets that suddenly there's too many around and the bees are becoming defensive. And that is like when you go, okay, we have a problem. So another video here, this was these are 3 colonies that have died. Okay, so they may not have actually been killed by hornets, but now the hornets know that either the colony there is virtually finished, they can sense that the colony is under stress and there's no way it's going to recover. They will only land on the front of a hive when there's no presence of bees, because they're like a bit cautious. Hornets aren't stupid, okay? This is a dead colony. You can see they're trying to push their way under that 5.5 mil gap, but they'll only do it when they feel like a bit cocky. They're like, well, let's have a go. They don't feel under any pressure. So I'm not saying ever that Asian hornets actually killed my colonies. I'm just saying they put so much pressure on them and they stop summer supersedure that's the reason why your colonies die in November and December and January. Very similar death to Varroa, okay? So it gives you some context. So this was the nest in front of my house, and I found this near the end of the season. We managed to destroy it before, there's my house. We managed to destroy this before we think the queens came out. And it was a really good big sized nest, probably full of adults, that probably would make 200, 300 queens that would disperse, but I managed to get that one. But as I said, it's one of thousands. So there's the nest. Remember, it's not just about your bees. Asian hornets are ecosystem depressors, and I want you to go away with that message that ecosystem depressors is the word. They will remove approximately 12 kilos of insects from your area, from where that one nest is, by the end of the season. So it is a large amount of insects lost to other insects in that region. And it takes it from birds, from mammals, and other animals that need those insects. It might be swallows that are just finishing their nest, because obviously, as I said, it doesn't really affect other insects till you get the numbers up in July. And I know most of the time, most birds are finished feeding by then. But what you've got to remember, these guys are what I would call protein junkies. They will take anything. They will take caterpillars off of trees and leaves and shrubs. They will take spiders out of webs. They will take whatever they can assimilate to be protein. And they will also take meat in some cases. The Asian hornet, that's a little bit of a different subject, but they don't tend to take so much meat, but they will take more insects, because that's just their habit that we've noticed. So it's very difficult to actually find something that they can eat and possibly take back to the nest that would kill them. I mean, we don't believe in open poisoning. It's not the way to go forward, but just to mention that, it's something we think about, but I mentioned Vespa orientalis before. You can do that with those, but Asian hornets don't take the bait up. They don't, so that's why we can't do that. So if you're thinking of, oh, I could chuck some sardines down or some fish meal, it doesn't seem to work, and we can't have control of that. Plus, it's not environmentally acceptable. So this was me last summer trying to make some nukes before doing my summer splits. So this would have been about towards the last 2 weeks of June, and you can see already the amount of Asian hornets that were coming into my frames. This is a frame of ivy honey from the previous winter that I dug out the frames in the spring, and I try and save my ivy honey to give to feed my nukes that I make in the spring. So this was just an example, but it gives you some kind of idea of how bad it was for us last year, because by the time we got to end of June, this is what we were seeing, absolutely massive amount of Asian hornets. So in August 2022, even the wasps disappeared, and they did some scientific gut analysis of the Asian hornet because it had switched to basically eating wasps, because all the other insects had basically been eaten. There's nothing around. So we had this massive dearth, we had huge temperatures, and there was nothing else for the Asian hornets to prey on, so they switched to the wasps, and the wasps just disappeared. We had a terrible year for wasps between June and July, and into August, they just vanished, and we couldn't understand why. Now we know why. So what caused the problems in 2022? So we had a mild winter, 2021, 2022. First thing, we were caught off guard. We did poor spring trapping because the previous year we're like, well, we had hardly any hornets that we noticed, and we thought that kind of it wasn't that bad. And oh, well, we put a few traps out, and we caught some traps last spring 2022, but we didn't catch many. And we thought, well, that's fine. It's a good indication that it's not going to be a bad year. Then we had the incredibly hot weather and a record spring harvest and summer harvest. We had a honeydew harvest, which we'd never had before here in any quantity. And then we had a poor summer harvest because it was just so hot by that time. The drought had kicked in, and we had no moisture around the chestnut trees. So as well, we had incredibly hot weather for a prolonged period. It wasn't just like a heat wave that lasted a couple of weeks. We had it from basically mid-March all the way through, as you know, right the way through to September. We think every founding queen that survived the winter probably made a nest. And that's the problem. So this was 18th of July, 2022. I'm sure you remember this. But it wasn't so much this day or the 3 or 4 days around it. Okay, we had like a week of near 40 degrees. It was the 30 degrees right from kind of end of June all the way through to the end of September. Every day was like scorching hot. So the whole of France is like parched to a crisp. You can see from this picture. And you can see there, Wales is the only place that's green. They had a record harvest in Wales that year because they all have so much water in the ground all the time that everything really went mad because the weather was perfect. So all that moisture was available. So everything did really well for them. But we, as you can see, are completely parched. Perfect conditions for the Asian hornet. So all my traps were full. Swatting by hand with a badminton racket is a nice way of giving the beekeepers a momentarily relief, okay? It doesn't do the job because they're so smart. They see the other mates dying and they just disappear off and find insects somewhere else, and then they'll come back when you've gone. There is no bycatch in these traps because there's no other insects to catch. The traps get so full if you don't clear them every 3 days that the hornets just walk out and they can't drown because there's no room for them to drown in these traps. These are the traps I'm talking about. They're the Vita Pharma traps, but I'll show you those after, just to give you some idea. So a hive fell over. This is something that I've never seen in my life. I've seen hives robbed out. Usually the bees would rob this hive that fell over because the pallet failed, whatever reason. It was so top heavy, blah, blah, blah. And you think it's going to be all right. You come back, the hive's fallen over, and usually the bees have emptied it out, and you're like, spitting feathers. But this time, the Asian hornets were robbing it out. And this is what you see when Asian hornets rob out honey. Completely different to how bees work. They literally go cell by cell. So there's just something different to note. So by this time, I'm so frustrated that I've got so many Asian hornets in my apiary. I don't know what to do. And then I'm living in denial by this time. I'm thinking, well, maybe they'll just, you know, do something else. I'll just see what happens in the spring. But I already was planning to build a new beekeeping, honey house. So I just literally channeled all my energy into that. And I planned just to keep focusing on that. And I'd kind of wait and see what happened over the winter. And as I said just before, I'm not blaming Asian hornet entirely on the death of my bees, but I lost 40% of my colonies last winter, the winter of 2022, 2023, coming into this spring. As I said, there's other things as well. And when you have a severe drought, everything else gets exasperated. So your Varroa control, which you did, doesn't seem very effective because it's just so hot. The bees are under stress. There's not much food. Everything is just amplified within the colony. Okay, stress from the heat as well. The bees were all hanging out the front. They couldn't even keep cool. So I didn't control my Varroa properly either. And those combining things probably led to 40% loss. I'm just saying it wasn't all Asian hornets, but it was a pretty big chunk of the reason why the stress was so bad. So the trouble with winter losses, there's some of the hives that I had to bring back this spring that had to be cleaned out. The work is enormous. You want to make sure that you bring them out. You've got to take the bases off. You've got to blowtorch the inside of the hive, but it's a good time to repaint, which is what I did. So I worked hard. I blowtorch inside, as I said, but it's not just that. It's you've got to melt the frames down. But there is one kind of, if there was ever a silver lining or a cloud, we say every cloud has a silver lining, it would have been the fact that when you get Asian hornets robbing out colonies, they rob everything. The frames are spotless. So every frame is virtually good to go for the next year because there's nothing in it. So you have a lot of frames to use, which is one thing you could say is the only bonus. You've still got to find a replacement colony. You've still got to realize that you're going to lose income from that colony. Maybe most of you people aren't professional. It's not so bad. It's not your main job. But for me, I'm like, how am I going to get out of this? So where to from here? This is where I bring in my sustainability. I'd lost a lot of bees, but I still had my nukes. And the nuke colonies seem to have survived well, probably because I've got a large amount of bees in a smaller area, in one area. And with hornet pressure, this is one of the ways you can, if you get if it goes pear-shaped in July and suddenly there's hornets everywhere, move all your bees to one area. It sounds crazy, but what it is, you've got the same amount of hornets you'd have in all the other apiaries preying on all of your bees in one area. So you're spreading the load, you're spread betting. So you can then trap that area even harder, and then you have less pressure on your colonies, and then you can feed your colonies pollen sub and things like that, and feed them to give them that boost that they really need. And it's less of a problem to do that when all the colonies are in one area. If you've got 4 or 5 apiaries or 2 apiaries, having to do it just for 2 apiaries is a lot more difficult than having to do it just for 1. Everything is in the right place. So I didn't sell any of my nukes this spring. I cashed them all in, and this was my sustainability. The nukes I'd made from the autumn before, they'd all been treated, they'd all been vaped over the winter, so they were all good. They were all super strong colonies, which was the best thing. So I was able to just like go, well, okay, it's a disaster, but there's always a better way. So I split my nukes, I put some into honey production, and then I did the same later on. So during the whole year, I was basically splitting where I could and pausing to get a little bit of spring and summer honey. And so initially I bought some mated queens from Tenuta Retiro in Italy. They're really good. I can buy them for 18 euros a pop because we're in Europe. I'm not going on about that, but for me, it was the godsend, I tell you. Because if I couldn't have got that, it would have taken a long time for me to recover so quickly, because I would have had to use a lot of the remaining resources I had as careful as I could to raise queens, because you need quite a lot of resources to raise a lot of queens. You know, if you want to raise like 100 or so queens, you need quite a few resources, as you know from my queen rearing talks. But I didn't have to do that because I just split everything I had after the spring, and I didn't have any swarming because it's all small colonies. So it was like easy to recover. So later in that season, I established enough resources to raise some good homegrown queens. And then going into this winter now, I'm up to 190/200 production hives and approximately 136 frame nukes. So recovery is possible, but I've used all my resources, but I have rebirthed, if you like, or reinvigorated that nuke bank that is now back there again. But a lot of those will go into production hives next spring as well, because I want to get up to 250 hives for this year. But you see my point. Recovery is possible if you've got resources, but you've got to build your resources in. So what happened this year in 2023? So we were expecting another nightmare year. Obviously we would. You know, it's like logical that it's been so bad that you'd expect it so bad again. So surely with all last year's nests, you'd expect to be a huge amount of primary nests, and it'd be a mirror year for 2020 from 2022. That should be a mirror year from last year. So we're not sure why 2023 turned out to be a very low year for Asian hornets in my region, but other regions close by didn't fare so well. Their numbers were quite high again. So this is why we think we didn't have so much of a problem this year with Asian hornets, okay? So we've got to get the community involved. So the inhabitants of Dinan agglomeration, and an agglomeration in France means a group of communes brought together. So we have, like, I think it's 33 communes in my group, and my ex-colleague Christian, who I used to work with, he is now president of the local B group, and he went around to a lot of these and gave a talk every evening on how people they were supplying free traps for one trap per household, and they were given the bait for it. And so someone could go and put a trap out at a certain time, and as long as they told them what the results were, the trap was given out free. And this seems to be the key, getting the community involved. Everyone wants to help, but they don't know how to do it. So they gave loads of people traps in our commune, our group of communes, and we think we got the numbers down. It's far better for everyone to spring trap the founding queens rather than waiting to see if a difficult nest to destroy in the summer that you often can't find. That's the key to it. So these are the traps I use at the moment. I have on the left-hand side the new trap from Jabberprod. It's a large selective trap, which almost everything can get out of except Asian hornets, including your honeybees. So and I love to bait this one with a small frame of ivy honey or a comb of ivy honey, and that's what I do on the right. I had last year non-selective traps, but I'll talk a little bit about selectivity and things like that. It's my honest goal to become totally bycatch free, but it's not always possible when you're commercial. But if you imagine you've lost 12 kilos of insects to the environment, if you've trapped 2 Asian hornets in that trap, you've saved 24 kilos. And if there's only 4 or 5 blue bottles in that trap with those 2 Asian hornets, it's a pretty good trade-off, I reckon. But it's at the same time, it's not acceptable. We want to aim for 0, but it's a pretty good trade-off, you know? That's what I'm getting across to you. So here we go. In every one of my apiaries this year, I trapped over 200 founding queens. And you look at that, there is no bycatch because we trap between middle of February and middle of May, before the main flight of the common hornet, Vespa crabo, starts. So we don't want to trap the Vespa crabo. We do trap a few, but we've seen no change in the amount of Vespa crabo around. Common hornets are still absolutely prolific and doing their job as well. Reports from other beekeepers are similar. Trap deployment is different to the summer, by the way. I've got a link to show you that you can watch 2 videos that have been published, and they're great info on where to place your spring traps and your summer traps. For us, the summer traps have to be right next to the colonies, because that's where the Asian hornets are coming, because there's nothing left anywhere else. So you've got to focus on that, and spring trapping is around the apiary and upwind of it, but you'll work that out when you read all the info on it. So this was why your year was so bad. You see, our weather played a huge contributing factor to us this year, as well as you. So spring 2023 was cold and persistent easterly winds for about 6 weeks, exactly when the young queens are trying to raise their starter nest. So that was already a negative factor for those queens rearing those young nests. We jokingly say they're all blown over to the UK from Belgium and France, because basically that's what seems to have happened in reality. So this is a old, badly looked after beehive. I hold my hand up and say, this is what happens when you're a professional beekeeper and you think you've got everything covered. I didn't snap the mouse guard down on this hive. I knew there was loads of dead outs. I was going through them when I could, but I got to this one. I think it was actually the last apiary, in fairness, in about mid-March. And this is an Asian hornet queen that had made a nest in an old hive, and a mouse had got in as well over the winter and chewed a lot of the frames out, as you can see. So it left a nice kind of place for an Asian hornet to build a cup, which was the starter nest. So that there is the egg that she's laid. And this egg, that one egg, will be the start of the entire colony. But as I said, she is at her most vulnerable at this time. So spring trapping in your apiaries is a really, really, really good way. You've got 6 weeks before even any workers are born. Well, any numbers of workers appear. So she's going to be round and about for at least 6 weeks. Okay. So the current methods using, the current methods that are used for locating Asian hornets' nests, we know the track and trace. We have bake and wick stations, a compass, stopwatch. You can track how long it takes from an Asian hornet to come back to the bait. There's some radio tracking work done. And there's also attaching a streamer to the thorax, and you release that and you use binoculars to watch off where she flies. But the radio tracking, just going back to that, it's a little bit in its infancy. I think as Exeter University came over to Jersey and did quite a bit of work on it, and I had some maybe pictures here, but you'll see that in a minute. But what I'm saying is the problem with radio tracking is it's still expensive to use the traps, and it's and you lose a lot of traps. So you've got to have radio trackers that are cheap, and they're not around yet. Okay, so this is a photograph provided by Alistair Christie, who is the Asian Hornet Coordinator for the States of Jersey, which are kind of like a model. I'm sure a lot of you know about them already. They've done fantastic work, and I reference them all the time in Asian Hornet because they are like the only part of the UK that's been permanently infested at this point, but we don't think that will be the case in the future. But they use attractant bottles and wicks, and I think they use Trap It as their wick stations, and then they can release the queens and do the tracking that way. But they've become really good at it. And I know a lot of people from the UK, and also the bee inspectors from the National Bee Unit, a lot of them have been over and done tracking experience, and they've actually really enjoyed it because they've learned a lot, because they've got plenty of experience when you go to Jersey. There's always loads to track there. So this is a bit about the radio tracking in the early days. I think it's Peter Kennedy that did this. Professor Peter Kennedy. You put the radio transmitter around the base of the hornet, and you can see there the transmitter hanging underneath. The hornet's released, and eventually you track it back to its location. With the Asian hornet nest, location is one thing, accessing it is another. If you're lucky enough to be in Jersey and you've got resources, or anywhere in the UK and you've got resources, great. But this isn't really sustainable. That's the problem. You know, I say to John DeCarteret, who's one of the founding members of the group, where are we going to go to from here when everyone gets bored of trapping hornets next year? And he's like, I don't know. It's an interesting thing. What do we do? How are we going to go forward with it? We've got to keep that energy going and got to help the environment. And that's what's important. Okay, so this is what they do in France. This is Robert Moon, a pest controller in France. I've come to know fairly well. He sends me pictures of what they're up to. And here they're using a permethrin-based paintball, and they can then fire that into the nest from a distance. I don't think this is licensed in the UK yet, but it probably will become licensed because it's a really good way of treating nuisance nests that you just can't reach. Don't forget, I mean, the majority of nests are in valleys. They're at the top of a tree in a valley. You might not even find the damn thing, you know, but it's just an example of what you can do. And there's what they do as well. They have a long lance. You can see, you can't actually see the nest. It's just above the window there in the eaves. But this is the classic thing where they'll fire some dust up through the pole and inject that into the nest. And it's not really a problem treating the nest. It's just getting the pesticide to the nest. And you might have seen pictures of people using drones. Drones aren't really efficient enough, and you see all the joke things about drones with flamethrowers. Well, that's the best way to destroy forests. You just need some idiot with a drone and a flamethrower, and your forest is gone. Because as I said before, most of the time you get a bad year is when you get a dearth, and when you get a dearth, you get drought, and when you get a drought, tinder dry everything. So you just can't be doing things like that. We've got to be sensible here. So this is just a snapshot of the Jersey Asian Hornet Group's Facebook page. You can see there a good community who work together. They do a lot of good, and they are interested in the environment. And that's what it's all about. Very few beekeepers actually remember this group, because literally professional beekeepers just don't have the time. And that, unfortunately, is the downside of being a beekeeper. Is as much as you can do trapping in your apiary very successfully because you're there, but you can't spend time chasing nests. And that's why we want to bring people from the other groups in. So you can see Jersey is literally in the lee of Cherbourg there on the right-hand side. And Guernsey gets a few Asian hornet nests as well, but Jersey seems to cop the most. So that it just gives you some idea of how close they are and why they keep getting infected. So that's one of we must think that's like funny that they've used, you know, a queen marking number, but that's exactly what they do. And they take this very seriously, and the results correspond to the work they put in. It's like all with things with beekeeping, you only get out what you put in, and they get out a lot of really good results. So this is where I'm going to give you some practical help for the beekeeper. I want you guys to go away and watch this special report or special presentation done by Andrew Durham. And it's absolutely brilliant, because Andrew Durham has analyzed a lot of the data over the last few years, and he's put it together in 2 really, really good, informative presentations. And by watching this, you'll learn about where the best places to trap. He doesn't know it all himself. He's just reporting. Obviously, he does know it because he's reported it, but it's what he's extracted from so many other people who've been working in Belgium, been working in France. We've had this for like 15, 18 years. I said 19, but I think it's probably like 15, 18 years we've actually been experiencing it, the true effects, and only 10 or 12 years in this area. But last year was the worst year. This, to me, is one of the best presentations you can watch, because it's a bit in detail, and it's a bit hard to take in, but that's what YouTube is for. You can go back and watch it again and again. So please have a look at this and watch it. Follow as many Asian hornet groups as possible. Find out if your beekeeping group has an Asian hornet coordinator. I don't need to mention that Lynn is obviously the one for Somerset beekeepers. She's doing a fantastic job. Everyone is now working together. We're all kind of getting that community, but it just gives you, I just took this snapshot of how many there is, and I think it's actually more than this they discovered now, but hopefully the message will get across, okay? So this is some of the equipment I use in my apiaries. As I said, I use the green doors, which do seem to work really well. They're 5.5 mil height, which so the bees can come and go really well, and then the hornets can't get in. My personal view is I would rather have a small door and less chance of the hornets getting in than a long door. But other people, we have this debate all the time with French beekeepers that a long door might be better because it gives the returning bees more of a chance to go in one side or the other and miss the hornets, okay? I don't know, but I can't really find any evidence to say one or the other. So I buy these doors, they clip in the front of these bases. They're all made by Nico, the company that make the queen rearing equipment. So it's dead easy to get them. Okay, so as I said, in general, they may give more of a target for the returning bees to be caught by the Asian hornets. However, it does give the bees more security inside, and I like that feeling that the colony feels protected, that there's nothing can get in. So Asian hornet, as I showed you before, they will not try and enter the colony while there is defending bees on the other side of the door. And if you can keep your colony strong, that's another thing. All these things all go back to keep your colony strong. It's not the answer, but it's the help. So that's a picture of 2 hives. I mean, every single one of my hives has one of these doors put on from basically July when I make my nukes up. So the use of muzzles on hives. And I can tell you a bit of a funny story about this, because when I was giving this talk in the National Honey Show 2 weeks ago, there's a guy that had just been bought 2 of these from the Thorn stand. And the story is apparently he walked straight out with them under his arm and then went back to the shop and exchanged them back in again, because basically these are a waste of time in my mind. Okay, if you've got 1 or 2 hives, it may give the returning bees an alternative way back in, and you may see and think that it actually helps. I have no evidence from any other beekeepers I know who are professional, who know what they're doing, that any of this has any effect or whatsoever. So I don't want to shatter any dreams, but they're just basically little or no evidence that it helps, okay? Electric harps. Go on about that. Everybody thinks that they're the answer to all your dreams. Well, unfortunately, they're not. There is some evidence, okay, if you've got one of these in one apiary and you've only got one apiary and you can afford to buy an electric harp and you can afford to install it and you come back every second day and make sure the tray is filled with soapy water and you bought the battery and you bought everything else to go with it, you're looking at probably 500 euros for one of these if you buy one. You can make one, possibly. There's evidence to say that it may help reduce some of the numbers, but it really doesn't make any difference. Again, there's so many hornets some years, all the traps are full, as you saw, and it makes no difference. So I know a commercial beekeeper in France has actually trialed a harp like this year, and as well as having to buy all your normal traps and pay for the bait for that, then you buy one of these, you're into over 1,000. For me, it cost me about 500 euros a year just in bait alone, just in the hornet trap juice. It's a ridiculous amount of money, but it's another thing that you have to factor into beekeeping now. So these are the selective and very effective traps by Jabberprod or Jabprod. They are a crate in essence, but it's the key to it is the entrance ways. You can see they're nice funnels. They've got the right size exits. The other good point about these traps is, and I can't like let you put your hands on one because I'm doing the talk, and my trap is here by my left-hand side and I'll hold it up after. But the bait goes underneath the trap. So the smell of the bait comes through the trap and out the sides and out the entrances. So the smell is still going in, but the hornets can't drown in the bait. So all the hornets do, and someone's probably going to ask me this question, is they actually die eventually of starvation and boredom, I think, and stress because they can't get out. But you can leave that trap full of hornets and they keep dying and dying and dying across the summer. But you can remove the top trap off the bottom bait tray and change the bait really easily and without releasing the hornets. So that's the beauty of that trap. And the other thing is, as well as that trap being effective, it keeps on working when the other ones are full. So you've got, this is why it interests me. I bought, well, I didn't need them this year, but I bought 12 of them. And that was about 700 euros I paid, including freight and all that stuff. I bought about 12 of them. I bought 12 to assemble, and I've only actually assembled, I think, 6 out of the 12 because I didn't need them this year because there was hardly any hornets. So you kind of see what I'm saying? It's there. In a bad year, they're really effective, but they're not a massive help when there's only a few. But there again, you don't have the problem in your apiaries anyway, and you're better off with the other traps that you can also modify. So as I said, I haven't fully tested these out because we've had such a better year this year. I will do the rest of those over the winter. Another thing for the list. So this is what you can do. You can make the whole of your front entranceway 5.5. So that we had some blocks we cut to the right size, and then the beehive entrance rests on that. Okay, so that works quite well. It's entirely what you want to do. And that's what we use for nukes. It's a standard mouse guard actually, but the bees can come and go, and that works pretty well. That's what I use for my bait. It cost me, I think, about 26 euros, 36 euros a bottle of this, but the one bottle, 1 litre, will do over 100 traps. So it's quite good. And the other reason is I used to use blackcurrant juice, white wine and beer, but don't worry, it's only can be cheap beer and cheap white wine. So you'll be breathing a sigh of relief. But that works, but you've got to get a lot of quantity mixed together. And it's easier just to buy this because you put half of this in 10 litres, you add a bag of sugar, fill it up with hot water, shake it around, and off you go. So you can see from my point of view, this is a really good option because it works and it's easy to get into the traps and it's easy to change. So that's what I use. Whether I'll continue to use this one, I don't know. It's a movable feast, as we say. So that was what I'm on about. In that trap, that's one of old bottle trap types. That you have a Coke bottle inverted, and you have a cover over the top of it to stop the rain going in, and you have a funnel. And inside there is 2 dead Asian hornet queens, and we know they're queens because they can only be queens in the spring while they're making their nests. But there's a few dead insects in there. But you imagine there's 24 kilos of insects there that aren't dead because of those 2 that are dead. I'm not saying it's acceptable, and I'm moving away from these traps. Well, I don't use these traps anymore now. I use the more selective ones already. But you've got to put everything into context. That's all I'm saying. So there's me in the spring at one of my apiaries, or getting stuff ready before the apiary, get a load of traps ready, bake them all up, and off they go out. I use the Vita Pharma Vespa catch as my main type of trap, but this is selective really because you're only targeting in a very early part of the spring. So this is how you can modify the Vita Pharma traps to become more selective. So you can get a soldering iron and you just basically make little holes in the side of the goblet and then one at the bottom. So what you do is you have a bit of jay's cloth and you soak up the jay's cloth and make a wick that comes through the bottom. I should have a better picture than that, but I'll go back to the first one. Just above that hole, you have like a piece of jay's cloth. The liquid all drains out, but you soak the jay's cloth up and you leave it in there. And it means then you can, most of the beneficial insects will fly out through the holes on the side and nothing will drown in the bottom. That's my point. You're not giving that trap anywhere that insects can drown. So everything is modifiable if you know the sizes and you can work it out. There's the wick that you can make, but it doesn't have to be like that, but this is the best way. So I talked about where you put your traps in the summer months. This is what we do. This is my friend Terry, who's a beekeeper further down south. He basically uses cattle wire holders, and they're brilliant because you can buy them ready-made. They're sprayed yellow, and that you can also buy the caps that go on top of them. So when you bend down next to your hives, you don't whack the metal bar in your eye, because you do not want to do that. You've got to be a bit shrewd here, because you could use reinforcing rods you can buy and do it cheap. Just think of yourself. Make it so that you're going to see the bar where it is. But for us, we can buy these for like €1 each. They're dirt cheap because there's thousands and thousands of cattle here that all need to be kept in with a wire. So for us, it's the most logical thing to use. You use what you have in every beekeeping aspect. So that was the finished trap. So you can see just a couple of photos flipped around there. That's the trap at the bottom with the wick, okay? But the wick, obviously, you can put your finger over the bottom, tip a load of new attractant in, that will soak up, then you can drain it out, and then you can use that as a trap, and then you don't kill any insects. If you get hornets in there that you want to kill, you can just put it in the freezer and put a new one in its place, and they'll be dead. So we're back to this trapping thing, because I really want you to go away knowing that the best time to trap is the spring, but also a big time to trap is recently emerged queens before they hibernate in the autumn. And that's what I've just done this year. It's what everybody's going to do now. So as much as it might be new to you that we're spring trapping really hard, but also trapping in the autumn, because there's no problem. We don't tend to trap any of the other insects. We just seem to trap Asian hornets at that time. And the Asian hornet queen, sorry. And if you get the workers as well, so be it. So give them plenty of traps, put them right outside your hives. This is one of my ex-colleagues, Apiaries. This is the way he does it. And this is kind of like a bit of a Quatermass and the pit video. It's like scary, but this is probably all Asian hornet queens. You'll see a bit of bycatch in that trap. This is the straightforward Vita Pharma trap. But at the end of the day, we're catching adult queens there, and we know that they're now not going to make that nest next spring. Okay, you could argue that a lot of the overwintering queens will die, and this is true. So let me give you some perspective on that. Probably 60–70% of the queens that overwinter behind bark of a tree or somewhere else, they will die. So a lot will die naturally, but isn't it better to trap a load in the autumn while you've got the chance to reduce those numbers down straight away? It's just common sense to me. So this is a guy in the Loire who sent me this. He's a beekeeper, and he trapped all these Asian hornet queens. And this is what I'm talking about in terms of flash release at the end of the season. He always had a few Asian hornets around, but never that many. He had a trap around, and suddenly it filled up at the end of the season. And why did it fill up? Flash release of queens, the end of the season. And this is what he got from that one trap for over about a week. There's 1 or 2 common hornets in there. I can't remember where they are, but there's 1 or 2 common ones. But generally, to me, that was well worth it. He's destroyed a load of Asian hornets. If you look at the trap, he's actually got a selective trap there because he's made a hole in the bottle, and he's only letting, I think some of the bycatch would have got out on that one, but not a lot. It doesn't matter. I mean, to me, that's like job done. So there was the nest in the tree in his garden, but he never saw it the whole season. Absolute classic issue. And this is something you can do as a practical experience. If you get a lot of Asian hornets right at the end of the season, you can just get a bottle light on its side, cut a V hole in the top of it, and stick some apple cider vinegar in it, because also the Asian hornets at that time are feeding on fallen fruit and everything they can find. But apple cider vinegar really kind of nails it as well. They absolutely love that. So an easy way of mopping up loads when you suddenly get that release. This is what you can do when you've got nukes. Literally just hang the traps between the hives. Does Asian hornet have any predators? It has one. You might have seen a video on YouTube or sorry, on Instagram, where you see some person pulling a long worm parasite out the back of a hornet. That is the same parasite, Canopsis vesticularis, but unfortunately there's not enough of them to do any real. It's like a parasite that is there but doesn't have enough effect on it. It's about the only thing that parasitizes Asian hornets, sadly. So this is one of my apiaries last week, just to show we had a flash release of queens, and you can see I've been squashing a lot of these with my hive tool test, and guess what? They fail every time. But I had some honey on the top, and we had Asian hornets just flying around being a pain. I didn't have any traps at this apiary because I had no Asian hornets there the whole year. Suddenly, they're all attracted to the area. So these are most likely to be queens. Not all of them, but most likely some of them are. So if you lead this presentation with this, if nothing else, spring and autumn trapping, it's an easy tool, cheaper and far more effective than anything else you can do later in the season. So my thoughts on the way forward, okay, take this as you find it. You've got to bring in the public and other groups as much as possible. You cannot manage on your own as beekeepers. No matter how good your intentions are, you need to bring other groups in. Get environmental groups involved, the National Trust. This is an attack on the environment. This is an attack on the fabric that we live in. Everything you know is going to suffer because of these insects, and we do not want that to happen. It happened in France. It's going to continue to happen here. We are now in that containment phase, which will never be able to contain it further. We're just going to have to put up with it. We must do everything we can to work together. Next spring is your last chance. If you don't catch any overwintered queens, it will be lost forever like France and Europe. Don't let this happen, okay? You've still got that chance. As much as the National Bee Unit are doing a fantastic job, I'm asking the question, should it be up to them to track and trace? Bee inspectors should be inspecting bees. You need a much more robust thing in place to sort the Asian hornets out. Jersey Asian Hornet Group has recruited many members, and surprisingly few beekeepers are involved. That's my whole point of this video and presentation, is to make sure that you see that and you realize that this has wide implications on everything. So you've got a great app. This is absolutely fantastic. You're going the right way. We don't have this in France. A lot of people are using this, and you've even taken to putting it on the side of buses. This is like absolutely brilliant. You know, I couldn't fault you in your. A lot of people were going, well, that's going to really make a difference. Well, it has, and people are really aware of it now. So thank you, and I wish you all well in 2024. I hope you enjoyed the presentation.
Wow, thanks, Richard. That was fantastic. Well, fantastically interesting and also terrifying at the same time. So we've got some questions. If anyone wants to ask a question, put it into the chat. I'm just going to start with some of the ones that are already in there. So just going to the beginning. Is there a saturation point regarding the number of Asian hornet hives an area can support? And I think the second part was about predators, but I think you already touched on that bit.
In general, in terms of kind of like what they would say is a threat to the colony, I think they say if it's permanently 3 or 4 outside of a hive permanently, there was some figures done right early stage when we were all starting to get used to it here. And there's no real kind of, any more than that, it's a disaster anyway. But once you get to that 3 or 4 Asian hornets hovering outside a hive or around the hive all the time, that's when you've got to start really worrying, because that's when your bees start to switch off. I talked about that moment where you start to see the bees mounding on the front. You go into an apiary and you'll go, oh, right, okay, I know what we're up against now. The whole atmosphere changes in the apiary. It may not happen to be that bad in the UK. You may keep on top of this. You may well just contain what you've got, and it will be back to how it was the year before last, where you have separate incursions, but they're dealt with. That's what I'm hoping is going to happen. It may just be a coincidence, but it may not be. And when you start to see like more than 3 or 4 in front of a hive, that's kind of when we say it's bad news. There's lots of figures out there, and lots of research done, but as a beekeeper, that's what we say, and that's what the figures were provided to the beekeeper. If you don't have more than like 10 traps in your apiary and you've got 10 hives, you've got to have the number of traps in when you see 3 or 4 in front of every hive. You just have to put the traps in.
Okay, great, thanks. So somebody's
I hope
asking,
that answers it. Sorry, carry on.
where's the best place to put the traps in spring and autumn? Because obviously it's different situations.
It is. Asian hornet queens will kind of survey quite a wide area, maybe a kilometre, as they gather their food, maybe even more, we've heard. But in an apiary, they say put your traps upwind. Generally, if you've got southwesterly wind, you put them in the north side, because the smell of the hives seems to attract the queens in. But you can put them in shrubs, like on a shrub, but make sure the shrub is like clean and kind of protected from swinging around in the wind. So I don't know if you can see this here. But if that's swinging around, you want to make sure that it can really swing well without falling off. That's the kind of thing, little things like that we've learned. You don't use this stupid little hook they provide with it. You kind of just use, you don't use that. You just kind of put a bit of wire on it as well. And you've got to really secure it to a branch. You need to like change your traps every 3 or 4 days if you can. But in the spring, it's not so warm. So they do work quite well for quite a while before the juice starts to ferment. So, it's one thing putting the traps out, it's another thing maintaining them on a regular basis at that critical time. So you're trapping between kind of, for us, it's the end of February, as I said. I might even go early this year if it's mild, because it seems to be getting warmer every year. But you want to have your traps out early in your apiaries, because there's going to be some queen hornets. They're going to go, oh, this smells good. They'll fly through it and they'll come back and start, because they just home in on that smell of wax and all that. They love all that. That's why I showed those pictures of an Asian hornet making a nest in one of my hives. They're just like, it's like what we say, a red rag to a bull. They just can't resist it. But if you look at the Andrew Dewey, I think I get muddled up with his names. So many people have been quoting. His presentation explains all this as well in detail, and it shows all the research on spring trapping and how and where to place your traps in the spring. That's why I said it's such a good talk. It really is.
And I was just thinking about, I was talking the other day and someone said, oh, well, I don't really visit my apiary that early, not much really that early in the year. And I guess it would be totally appropriate to hang a trap somewhere where you couldn't help but notice it. Again, I was thinking about bycatch.
Yeah.
Worried about. So I sometimes hang them outside my kitchen window, where every time I make a cup of tea, I can't help but notice it. And that way, was anything in there, I could release that immediately.
I will say one thing: if you're in an area that's had a nest this year, okay, I would advise you to trap, but I would not advise you to trap unless you're using selective traps in an area that has never had an Asian hornet nest nearby. Okay, and if you do, please use a selective trap. Okay, I want to just make that absolutely clear, because you're only going to attract bycatch if you're not selective in your trapping. Okay, but if you have an area that has had an infestation in the summer that they think they've got, there's nothing wrong with putting a few traps out, providing you can monitor them, because you need to do that. The other thing is, if someone said, well, I don't go to my apiary, this is one of the problems of Asian hornets. It's going to change your beekeeping, and you're going to have to learn just to go in your apiary earlier in the year. It's just part of it. There might be some people that just say, you know what, with all this, I'm going to give up beekeeping. And there's 30% less adherence to our big beekeeping group in my region in 22, Côte d'Amour, this year as opposed to last year. So people will probably give up as well. And that's unfortunately one of the problems. But I wanted to just say that as well, because it's doom and gloom, but there's a way forward. That's all we can do. You have to change your beekeeping habits. It's like another varroa. It's like we've got Tropicalaps coming as well, probably. We might even have a small hive beetle that's lurking in the Reunion Islands. So we don't know what. But at the moment, I would suggest you to trap in your apiaries if you've been near an area, because they can go up to 10 kilometers with the wind behind them. They'll move. They'll keep going inland. They're terrible.
Just to clarify the autumn trapping, those pictures you showed of various apiaries when you were your colleagues were autumn trapping, they seem to have one trap per hive. Is that what you'd recommend, really? I know.
If you're in, Yes, if you're in an area that has an infestation, you want at least one trap per hive in the autumn. Because I said when you have a situation like we had last year, and it was kind of weird because I've got an apiary here at home with like 8 hives, and that's all because they were just hives I just brought back. So I'll stick that down there and I'll stick another one down there, and I better move those and never get around to it. And I've suddenly got an apiary here at home again. Those bees weren't predated much at all during the summer, but then the one nest that was nearby has suddenly emptied out, and all the traps I had out, I only had 4. I put 8 out straight away, and they're all full, and I've had to empty them out. I mean, you saw me, I brought some Asian hornets specimens to the National Honey Show for my talk there for the for the presentation I did, and they were all from the traps from one apiary. It was so easy to collect a load. It just literally bang, the traps are full. So it's surprising how many you can catch in the autumn. Very surprising.
Somebody's actually asked Richard for a bit of detail about timing. So obviously in the autumn, you've still got tons of workers that are really busy predating your bees. But then moving on to talking about trapping the queens and that are emerging. So would you keep all your traps, that you've had to trap your workers? Would you just keep them all in position?
Yeah, I do. And I know when our temperatures are about to drop, and I know when the weather goes dirty here, and that's what's happened in the last 2 weeks. We've suddenly gone from like that continuing fairly warm like weather, and we've now gone to like the southwesterlies. That is the time that the nests will finish. They're all the same family: Vespa, wasps, hornets. They all finish this time of year. If you time everything to make sure that your traps are refreshed at the end of the season, just like the last week of October, maybe the second week of October, around that period, just keep your traps full, keep them clean. And then if you have a nest nearby, you will just suddenly see, even if it's 3 or 4 hornets you trap and you were getting none before, that was worth it to me. That's what it's all about. But with my apiaries, it's like from like 3 or 4 a day to like 25, 30 a day. That gives you some idea of the change in volume. Literally, I've had to empty my traps the week before last. I haven't emptied them from last week because there's still some space in, and now it's finished. We are done now. If there's any Asian hornets around, they're like wasps, they're like a few workers hanging around, just being a nuisance, not really, they're just on their way out. It's the end of the season. So, but you will see a marked change as those nests empty out, and it's the nest you can't find. I hope you never get to the situation where you're finding Asian hornets and not finding the nest, because I still think you've got the resources to do it in the UK, and you've got enough people on the ground, enough foot soldiers to like, let's track this, so-and-so up the road's got a nest, we're going to find that nest, and then we know where it was, and we're going to trap next spring as well, just in case we miss some of the queens. Even a late discovered nest is still a useful tool, because you know where to trap the following spring to get any queens that were missed. That's an important point.
So somebody's asking about other types of hornets, which is pretty bad news for us. We have sort of only just starting to get to grips with the fact that they might be established in the UK. But what other types of hornets are on the horizon?
So, I mean, I think it's unlikely, but you've got the Vespa mandriana, which is the giant Japanese hornet. That's in the United States. They think they've curtailed that, but it's a possibility. That is the one that you see on the National Geographic videos that will go in and actually decimate your colonies within 4 or 5 hours if there's enough of them nearby. But the problem is they've got to build up a colony first strong enough so that when they hunt, they can all find a colony. This is the Vespa mandriana, or the giant Japanese hornet, is the one that has resistance by the local honeybees in Japan, where they pounce on the hornet. They wait till it's actually inside the colony, and they don't do anything at all. They just wait for it to come in, because they know that if that hornet leaves, it'll bring all its mates back with it, and it's curtains, it's finished. But if they wait till it comes in, then they pounce on it, and they smother it, as you know, by boiling and cooking the hornet. That's their method. I don't know much about Vespa orientalis. All I know is that it's actually much less of a real issue because of its habit, and it's a little bit slower to get going. It doesn't seem to be so impactful on the colonies, but I don't know much more about that. But they're the only 2 other hornets that we haven't got at the moment. So I don't think we're going to get the giant Japanese hornet. I think that would be too difficult for it to establish, and I believe it does need quite a warm climate. If any of you guys out there watch Instagram or YouTube, you will often see a guy in a complete sealed suit, digging one out the ground, because those are ground nesters and they all nest in the ground. They never have a nest in the tree. So that's another bonus as well, because ground nesting things are actually a little bit easier to track than ones that disappear into the canopy. So, and when you find it, you can treat it, if you know what I mean. And these videos you might see on like WhatsApp, YouTube, Instagram, all that, you might see that they actually harvest these and they dig out the whole nest and they then eat it afterwards. So it's like a food source. So they quite like having them because they dig them out, but we don't want them here. But I don't think it will get to that stage here. But it's just something to be aware of. I think there's other pests and diseases that are more likely to come in, like the small hive beetle, like Tropicalaps, before we get another hornet. But never say never. I mean, this one's taken us all by surprise. We never thought it would be. I said publicly, I don't think Asian hornets will ever be a problem in the UK, and I take back my words. But there's still chance.
Yeah. Somebody's asking when, like in your area, when there's so many Asian hornets around, they're talking about, is there a negative impact on other pollinators? You know, not just your managed bees, but just thinking about nectar competition.
Well, absolutely. But at the time it gets bad is when there's no nectar, really, because it's our dearth. So it's like a double whammy. I was trying to explain before that was why I was telling you about our 2 nectar flows. After mid-July, there's no nectar. So then when it all comes at the wrong time, so there's nothing for the other bees, nothing for the hornets, and then the hornets get predated because there's nothing for them. And there's no other insects on the flowers because they've died or finished their life cycle, or the Asian hornets predate them. So everything kind of like just funnels in on your bees, because your bees are the only thing that's flying because they've eaten most of the other things. So it becomes really stressful for your colonies.
Somebody's asked about how you set up your selective trap. And I'm not sure if this person, perhaps whoever it is, could just clarify whether they're meaning that crate trap or whether the modified thorns one.
Hello, Lynn. It was me, Robin Bagnall. I was interested in, you showed on your presentation a selective trap, and you said that you have one to hand, but it was too difficult to actually show how you set it up, as well as do the presentation. But it looked like a crate or something that you fit.
I've got that one right here.
Thanks.
There you go. I don't know if you can, just bear with me. I'm just going to remove my without let me see if I can find. I want to remove my background so that I can show you the crate better. But sorry, carry on, sir. I didn't let you finish.
It was just that it looked like a crate, and I couldn't work out whether you actually fitted that underneath the brood box or whether you had it to one side or whatever, how you would use it.
Okay, so it's a standalone trap. You put it in the apiary amongst other colonies. It doesn't go under the trap. I mean, there's other people that talk about the underfloor entrances that are supposed to help against common hornets and all that. They don't really work either. The reason why we know this is because there was a thing going around saying you should let the grass grow in front of your hives, so it gives the returning bees another way home, so they won't get taken by the hornets. And we find the hornets hovering in the grass, waiting for the bees. I mean, there's nothing you can do, okay, that's any good. But if you follow my YouTube channel, you'd have seen these in the YouTube channel. I don't know if you can see that. It's not coming up very well. There's the trap there. But it is really a really good trap. There's other ones around. I've got the one here from Guard Apis. I don't know if you've seen these. These are coming into vogue now. There's a lot of people talking about these as well. So basically, you when you get a hornet, you'll put one in here, and it will attract the others in. And there's a little bait station in here, and it's basically like a queen excluded material that the hornets, they sense another hornet. That's the beauty of all these bigger traps, is they trap hornets, but they also allow the hornets to send out their pheromone that they're in trouble, and it attracts other ones in.
How many of those would you put in your apiary?
Yes, I would, yeah. But
how many?
In the spring, sorry, carry on, sir.
How many? Sorry, Richard.
Okay, no problem. You revise if you've got a heavy infestation, a minimum of 2. Okay, if you've got, say, 20 hives. If you've got 1, that's better than nothing. But if you've got these straightforward traps from Vita Pharma, you need at least 6 to 8 of these in maybe 10 hives minimum if you've got a high infestation, because they will fill up within 3 days. That's what I find. But I don't think you'll get to that stage, but we shall see. But what I'm saying is you need to get traps ready so that you can stick them out if you start to see Asian hornets, because the thing is they start so slowly and they can suddenly cascade to being a lot very quickly. That's the thing. So you need to have like things ready. And I'm not saying go and buy 20 traps, because that's going to set you back, you know, like 120 quid at the moment. They're $6 each. I get these for about €1.20 a piece. You guys, they're charging you £7 each at the moment. I'm not going to say who's charging that, but that's what most people are selling them for. And it's absolutely a ridiculous amount of money. But I think what you need to get is what you need to do is get together as a collective in your group and negotiate with the beta farmer and say, we want to buy X amount, and no one's going to buy them unless you give us a good price, but they're still going to sell thousands. So it's one way of kind of moving forward, if you can, to get plenty of traps into the country.
Thank you, Richard.
Sorry, carry on.
Thank you, Richard.
No problem. I hope there's some help. I've got a lot on my YouTube channel. You can see the pictures of the jab prod video being used, and I talk about it, and I've got some other information on my YouTube channel. So if you want to go to Richard Noel Beekeeping on my YouTube channel, don't hesitate to, and send me questions through there, and I'll help if I can. I'm just kind of purveying what experience I've got. I don't know it all. I'm kind of like everybody you saw. I'm just fumbling through the madness. And I don't want people to have the same problem I had. All I want to do is give you guys perspective, so that hopefully you can go, it's bad, but we dealt with it this way, and look how Richard Noel recovered last year. So it gives you hope for the future. There's always a way forward. That's what you've got to do.
Yeah, so I agree, Richard, that just getting together, we in the Southwest, a load of the Asian hornet teams, we got together and bought bait and traps, and we got a much better price, that we all benefited from low price. But someone's asking here saying, it strikes me that pricing for the bait is opportunistically high. Surely we can produce something that can be distributed at cost. And Simon was just talking about Trap It, which is what we've been using, but yeah, it has gone up.
Trap It is the most expensive, yeah. Trap It is the most expensive. It's something crazy like £60 a litre or something to buy it. I mean, it's like, to me, I just couldn't even go that way.
No,
so,
we £50 for 5 litres.
Oh, that's really good. That's a good price.
Yeah, and you don't.
But I mean, that's what people were paying if they were buying it just ad hoc. I mean, it's online. It's a big price, you know. But it is the best trap. It is the best bait. It works. So, but as I said before, it's another thing we're having to factor into our beekeeping kind of expenses. It's like, mite treatments, you know, feeding bees, sugar's gone up, and now you've got Asian hornet traps and the bait, and it's like becoming all a bit of a nightmare, to be honest. You know what I mean? More of a one than it was before.
Somebody's asked if you tried those sticky mouse traps to trap Asian hornet. I saw a video. It was really quite horrible, but I don't know if you tried it or know people who have.
They are used a lot, as I said, for the Vespa mandriana when they start to predate colony, because they can bring other members back and they land on it, and then the pheromone they release while they're on the sticky trap brings the other ones in to try and help. But believe it or not, those sticky pads are designed for catching mice. So you'd slide it under your freezer and leave it there, and they actually cost quite a bit, considerably more than the. Don't forget, I'll say this as well. Those traps from Vita Pharma, these will last a long time now. This is like, I've had these for 3 years, and they've changed the design. They're nice and supple. They don't break. They used to be really brittle. They've upgraded them all. And I will explain why this works so well, okay? This is good we pointed this out, okay? So this trap, you've got your goblet, you put your bait in it, you put your lid on it, and you make sure that the lid, when it's closed, faces the front of the hole. I'll explain what I mean. I'll just close this up. So there's your trap. I hope you can see this. And in the front, you want the hole that goes inside right at the entrance here. So what happens, the hornet has somewhere to land for a start, okay? This is why this is so simple, but it works. So it smells the bait, it lands on there, and it looks into that hole. And you can see the hole inside, probably just about see it there. But when it looks in, it sees the light underneath. And that's why it tricks it, because it thinks it's safe to go in, and then it sees other hornets and smells them, and then it goes in. So as much as these are like considered to be cheap and not that good, but they're not very selective, if you can make them a bit more selective, my wish would be they could make them deeper and bigger, because they seem to work really, really well. And they're just so simple. But because this is black and the light comes through the bottom, the hornets look in they go, and they're trapped. It's as simple as that. You've got to devise something that will do a job like that. And that's what this trap does at the moment. You know, if you could see it, oh, sorry, yeah. That's what this trap does at the moment. It seems to work pretty well. So that's why we have to keep sticking with it, because it works. You use what you have that works, you know, and you can get traps into your apiary cheaper. But I would say the jabber prod traps are really good. They might need a bit more. I'm not sure I'm putting them in the perfect place yet. I'm not sure I'm giving them the right bait yet. But there's all these things that I'm learning, because I've only had one really bad year. So I've invested in those traps as well.
So earlier on, you talked about modifying the Vespa traps by drilling inside to let bycatch.
Yep.
Somebody's asked what size holes.
Okay, well, it's I believe it's 5.5 mil, but we can clarify that. 5.5 mil means the Asian hornets queens can't get out, and nor can the workers. But anything less than that, most other insects can. So I think if you go to like 5.4, 5.3, but you can work it out, and you can get either a hot. The thing is not to drill these without. If you're going to drill it, best way to do it is put a bit of wood inside of here first. So then you can push against it. Otherwise, you could crack it and all that. You want to drill it cleanly. So if not, use a soldering iron with just a hot drill bit on a blow lamp. Just mind your fingers, just push it through, and you can get those holes drilled in the right size. If you want to go onto the Facebook page, the Jersey Asian Hornet Group, they will give you the correct size. I'm sure it's 5.5, but you can find out for sure. And you can make your traps 100% or 99% selective.
So we talked about colonies being, you know, the weaker colonies being picked off, etc. And somebody is saying, since bigger, stronger colonies cope better, should we move to double brood boxes? Bear in mind, most people in Britain use national brood boxes. You think that would be useful? So you've got a much bigger.
I think it would certainly help, because the more bees, the more brood. You know how it works. But at the same time, I think you'll find that most of your colonies will probably reach their potential anyway, whether they're on brood, double brood, or a commercial size container. If they're on single brood nationals, I would say definitely use a double national, because you need that volume so the bees can go into. But I wouldn't personally, because we use Dadens and they're huge, and I find that it makes no difference if you've got a colony that's weak and doesn't requeen, it's going to die anyway. You know what I mean? That's what I'm saying. It's not that it's particularly targeted because it's weak. It's weak because it was just another one that didn't make it, and then it's got less and less and less, and it's died. I don't think Asian hornets actually physically go out to kill the nest. I don't quite know how we could explain it, but I don't think it's in their interest to actually destroy the nest. But what they do is they just pilfer it and everything around it the best way they can to get the maximum for it. So if your bees are weak in any way, if they don't have your varroa controlled well, if they're not fed well, if had a poor spring, blah, 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 they are more susceptible to the other effects of Asian hornets if you have a drought in the summer, and all those things cascade through that problem. So you end up with a colony that's dead. I mean, we might say, well, in 20 years' time, maybe our bees will have evolved to do something else, and they might be even stronger. Yeah, it's possible. It's possible. But we're seeing no evidence at the moment of any action by the bees in the last 10 years here that says that they're any more resistant to Asian hornet in the slightest. So I think it'll be a long, long time before we see anything like that.
So somebody's asked an interesting question, because often we think about Asian hornets as being a problem in rural areas, talking about bushes and they're in trees and so on and so forth. And this person's asking about the issue for urban beekeepers and, you know, urban settings. And
yeah, I mean, in Paris, they have, and in all big cities, they have a big Asian hornet problem, probably worse than in some rural areas. So it's kind of, you might find that your colony, if you've got a rural setting, an urban beehives, and there's like loads of houses around that you can't find the nest. So we get the problem here where, for example, Asian hornets love to make nests behind shutters. We get a lot of Parisians with second homes. So if you've got any apiaries near Dinard up the road, it's a massive tourist area. Half the houses stay empty all winter, and they don't come to see their houses till May and June. And they come up and find that there's an Asian hornet's nest behind the shutter, and it's quite big by that time. This is the kind of thing we get. You can actually get more problems in urban areas, and you've only got 2 hives there, so they've got a big load of hornets around in many different buildings and all that, and that can be worse. I mean, it just seems that wherever you are, in whatever situation you're in, you're vulnerable for one reason or another. There's no place that we've got that where there's any less. Because people used to say to me, oh, why don't you move your bees to a place where there's no hornets? Like, well, where would that be then? Iceland? You know, it's like, it just doesn't exist. So, so what we learn is to move your bees together as think of like a shoal of fish that's being predated. It gets much less predated if there's a bigger shoal in one area. That's kind of how I think about it.
So we got a few. Are you okay to answer a few more questions?
Yeah, we'll carry on for now.
So a point that somebody's, well, there's a couple of things. So one is somebody saying there's lots of freely available files on the internet. So if you've got a 3D printer, you can print, so like that guard apis one you've got, those cones that you link up with a queen excluder to make it like a guard apis, or a similar.
This one here, yeah. This one there, yeah.
Onto a jar. Smaller versions of that you can screw onto a jam jar. So if anybody's got a 3D printer, do have a look, because that's a cheaper option.
Yeah. And you can actually, in France, you can buy just the yellow caps that you can screw onto bottles here. And they actually do work quite well. They're not very selective, but you could drill holes in the bottle, and definitely at the end of the year, they work really well, because at the end of the year, as I said, we're just mopping up like thousands of hornets. Yeah. There might be queens, there's some drones, but it is a really good thing if you can buy them or print them. There's all sorts of things happening, and I'm sure the UK is pretty innovative, and someone will bring something out that works just that little bit better. There's another trap I've seen, and I can't remember who makes it, but I think it's a French company as well, and it's like a trap with 2 side ears on it. And it's the same thing. When a hornet goes in, they go in through the top, like I showed before on this trap, but when they go in, they see the light and they come out to the 2 side pieces, and it's those bits that fill up with hornets. And that seems to work quite well as well, but it's a little bit more expensive. Not as expensive as the jabber prod, but I think it's in the 20 or 30 euro per trap. So there's all things moving forward, and I just think we've got to go with what we know works, but at the same time try different things, because it's worth being innovative at this stage, because we might just find something that takes the edge.
Yeah, and somebody earlier had mentioned underfloors, underfloor entrances, and I think you mentioned that as
it doesn't really seem to do anything, and the problem is that you're paying a lot of money for underfloor entrance that doesn't really change the scenario. The bees are still getting predated, whether they're in the field or in front of your hives. That is the number one kind of basic problem. It's still going to get predated. So
somebody's raised an issue, which is an issue in Britain, which is especially, or when you're tracking hornets, we're not allowed by law to release hornets that have been caught. So in Jersey, for example, if people are tracking hornets, they can catch it in a queen marking cage, mark it with a pen, and then let it go and then follow it off to the nest. Now, we can't do that in Britain. And somebody just raised that as a point, saying that we can't legally track and release in the UK, so we can only trap. And I guess there's sort of different things, aren't there? There's the trapping that you're doing around your apiaries, and then there's some sort of catching and stuff that you're doing to, when you're going to track towards a nest.
Yeah. I mean, it's not something that I ever even think about here, because as a beekeeper, I don't have time to track nests. If I found one nearby, I'd get it destroyed. If I saw a passage of hornets regularly going to an area, I would probably track it down, but I just don't have the time. And no one over here I know of tracks hornets. Nobody, because they just haven't got the time. We're all farmers, we're all beekeepers. It's very rural. We've got more stuff to do. That's why hornets have just got away, because there's no, and I explained before about Dinard agglomeration issuing hornet traps out to the public. That's the other side. That's where it's coming in now, but it's kind of too late. it is very difficult to know the best way forward. If I had the time, I would love to be able to spend time going out tracking down Asian hornet nests, just kind of like as a hobby. I mean, there's people in Jersey that do that. It's their Sunday afternoon job. It's a bit like when they used to go orienteering, or it's actually quite a bit of fun, and there's a lot of skill involved in it. And when you find the nest, you feel you're doing something for the environment. So it's a really good thing to remind people of, and hopefully bring that in to an equation somewhere, that we need people who want to help protect the environment. Fine, this is what you can do. Find Asian hornet's nest, and they'll learn how to do that. That's what we need to be doing.
Yeah. So wait a minute, I just quickly move forward. So wait a minute. No, we've done the entrances. Has the arrival of Asian hornets affected your honey crop?
It's an interesting question. I would say most definitely, but it was also probably because we had a drought at the same time. So one goes with the other. So this year we didn't have a bad honey year. It was an okay year. It wasn't terrifically good, but because I had my losses last year and I was recovering, I didn't have the colonies that I needed to bring in a big honey crop. So it kind of like works. So next year, I'm hoping that because I've recovered and we don't have a bad year, I'll have a good year. But the number one thing is the hornets don't appear in numbers till July. And the honey's all done then. You're finished for the year. So we could have another bad year this year, but I could have a massive honey crop like I had last year. Last year I had like nearly 3 tons of spring honey. I mean, it was just crazy. And then I had, I think, nearly 1.5 tons of summer honey. It wasn't as good because it was a drought, but it was already kind of in the bag because it was just a good year as well. But then we had the drought and the hornets just went mad. So they don't go hand in hand, and you can have a good year and then have a lot of hornets. But the following year, you're in kind of dealing with the aftermath the following year. That's the problem. So I haven't had much honey this year. It's not the same year that you generally have that. If that's any kind of way of thinking about it, it's difficult to describe.
So a couple of people have asked, they're really quite intrigued because you said you'd been stung by a hornet. Yeah. And how does it compare to a bee sting?
Okay, so I got stung also about 3 weeks ago, badly. I was picking up a feeder bucket that I'd just been feeding the last 2 to 1 at my nuke yard, where you saw me there with my nukes. I grabbed a feeder bucket. I didn't see behind it. I squeezed an Asian hornet as I was picking up the bucket because it was on the edge. And I can tell you now that the pain, right, when you get a full sting is so intense. And I get bee stings all the time. I'm like, ow, that hurts. And I curse and I swear we all do that. But I literally had to come home and sit down. I did a bit of heart monitoring. I was not reacting to it, but the pain was so intense. I said to my son, just don't speak to me. I need just to be quiet. I took like 2 paracetamol, and it was an hour and a half later till I started to like feel a little bit better because the pain was dulled down. It's just so intense, the pain. It was like if you get a really nasty skin burn, but it's only on the surface. That's the kind of pain I'm talking about. It's not, it's a really intense pain, and it throbs. And yeah, I actually got the mark on my finger there. And if you can still see it, just I got stung. That's where I got stung, just there. And it's taken like, and the itching, it's like a wasp sting when it subsides. You just want to you almost want to deglove your finger because the itch is so intense. That's the only way I can describe it, and that's how it feels. I've been stung also when I saw that nest out the front of my house. I got stung twice on my head. That was really painful as well. But I don't think I had a full dose thing, because I think when I squeezed that hornet that was on the bucket, I really kind of like, if you squeeze a bee because you pick up a frame and you've got no gloves, but you can't drop the frame because you know that if you do, you're going to probably drop the queen and all the bees will fall off. So you hold it, but you've actually pushed that bee sting into your finger. It's a bit like that. You're doomed because you're going to get the full dose. And that's what I think I got. But horrible pain, horrible. If that answers your question.
So somebody said that because you recommended Andrew's thing, and unfortunately I was away and didn't get around to seeing that. Just about the Andrew Durham things. We've just had a message saying that the links to both of Andrew's talks have been put back up onto the BBKA Facebook page. So if you missed that includes me, then you can catch up with them now. They've been put up this evening.
Okay. I mean, I've looked at them both right the way through, and if you're wanting instant, like, kind of gratification about how to deal with hornets, you're going to struggle with that talk, because it's very in-depth and very precise. But that's what you need to know. You need to watch a bit and come back to it, because there's so much really good information in there. And I mean that. And I've seen loads of talks on Asian hornets. It is really good. About everything is in there that you could ever wish to know about it. Far better than me rabbiting on about my experiences. This, like, the real deal of how all the information he's put together from all the other evidence that's around is there, about spring trapping, about numbers, about how it's evolved. It's really, really good talk. I suggest you all watch it.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. But I think your experience is very different to Andrew's, isn't it? Because you're actually living with it on a very practical level. And I think that's what's really useful for us to hear as well. The research is well, but yours is very much what we may end up doing. So being able to hear about it now, I think, is very useful for us. Somebody did
for me, it's been really, sorry, carry on.
I was just going to say that somebody said that Andrew, they thought that Andrew was recommending the muzzles and harps, and you weren't so sure. Any thinking about that, or is that about your practical experience, as a beekeeper?
Well, it may be because I'm more commercially minded, and I'm thinking of like 150, 200 colonies and the logistics around that. Whereas if you, as I said, you might find it helps. I don't believe it does, but there's evidence, there's certain evidence to say that really it doesn't have much of an effect regardless. But if you think it does help and you want to do it for your bees, you carry on. It's your own choice. This is what it's all about. Thank goodness we can all have freedom of choice and try and do this thing, because it's someone trying something different that might make the difference. That's what it's all about. This is a problem we've all got to work together on. And and now we can all talk about it on forums and discuss these things. And that's what's happened in France. Some people say it's good. Some people say it doesn't work. I personally say, I don't think it works. I don't want to shell out for all those muzzles and then have to fit them and hold them on the front of my hives while I'm doing my beekeeping. It's just a non-starter for me, but other people might find it's okay, So
again, question, somebody's a bit confused about something you said earlier, which was around whether you should trap or not. And they weren't sure whether you were saying you should only trap if there definitely were Asian hornet nests in the area or suspected nests in your area. Could you just clarify that?
I'll be absolutely clear on that. If there was an Asian hornet nest within, say, 10 kilometers of your area, you want to be spring trapping this coming spring, but use selective traps. But there is no point in putting out Asian hornet traps that are non-selective in an area where there was no Asian hornets whatsoever. You are just going to probably damage the environment a little bit. Okay, that's how I feel. But I would say, please trap if you're within 10 kilometers or so of where there was an outbreak, because you just never know. You might get that one queen, you might get 5 queens, you might get 10 queens, and then it will alert everybody else to say, hang on a minute, we need to trap more in this area. Because once you start getting a couple of queens, there's time to put traps out in a wider area. You can really, this is what that communication, that community thing's all about. You can really get on top of the issue before it spirals out of control. That's what you should do. So I hope that clears that up.
So somebody's asking us, I know you mentioned drones, and someone said regarding drones, flamethrowers and all that. Oh, regarding drones, flamethrowers sounds nuts. However, if the nest is found in a tall tree, could a large drone be used to ram the nest at the point where it connects to the branch, thus knock it to the ground, where it could be eliminated much more easily, possibly after a few hours to, select the...
Yeah, I mean, that's, to be fair, a bit of a dream. That would be great if we could do that. The problem is, as well, if you disturb a nest with an Asian hornet queen in, she can still fly, and the nest can actually re-establish somewhere else. Okay, later in the year, it's a little bit more difficult. But a drone, in all the Asian hornets nests I've ever seen, there's never going to be a drone that is strong enough to detach a nest cleanly without getting the drone tangled in the tree and take it somewhere else, or let it fall to the ground, because it won't even fall to the ground cleanly. They make a nest around a strong branch. In all the nests I've seen, you can't cut it with a drone. Have a look at some of the nests. People out there, you will see how they're constructed. They're always solid on a large, they're not stupid. They know that we get wind. They build these nests to to kind of survive. You saw the pictures I had that I showed you me holding the nest. It's like loads of branches through it. It's the same when they build them in brambles. They won't build it through a tiny bit of bramble. They'll build it through a whole raft of brambles. So if you're trying to remove that nest, everything you touch around the bramble area is like a spider's web. It gives the hornets like a little bit of a tweak, and then all start coming out the nest when you mess with the brambles. That's what they do. I think they do it because it also centers the sensory area and means that if anything happens to the tree, or anyone's climbing it, or anyone's messing with the branches, they'll know about it. So they build it really well and they tangle it up really well, it seems.
Yeah, right.
I just think the drone is everyone I've seen using a drone, they always come out with these great intentions, but in reality, none of them ever work.
It must be really difficult to steer a drone just into exactly the right position with all the other branches around. But
the thing is that I showed you that one nest where they were using the paintball, and you could see that nest hanging from the tree. But most of the time, they don't present like that. They're actually right in a canopy, and you've got to you might just catch a glimpse of it as you kind of come around the tree at a different angle. But you've got to know what you're looking for, and you could never get a drone in there. It's impossible. If you look at the Jersey Asian Hornet Group, there's endless photos of exactly this, where drones are totally the wrong piece of equipment to try and tackle that. The only thing you can do is either paintball or a long lance. And in France, they just don't treat it because they can't get to it.
So quick bit of news here that's just come in, which is that Vita Pharma apparently are making a second version of their trap, version 2, which is a selective trap. And that's coming out in the spring of 2024. So once those come out, you won't need to drill the holes yourself. I'm guessing that those holes will already be drilled. Now, someone's asked a really important question here, which is, if a nest is found, how do we destroy it? And then specialist question mark. So I don't know if you want to say something about that, Richard, or I can talk about what's... Well,
personally, I can't really comment on that because it's down to your licensing authority to how they should deal with it, and your Asian Hornet AHAT group. If it was up to us, we can get our commune in, and they will probably pay for it to be destroyed if they can get to it. That's all I can say. It's a completely different scenario until they change the licensing laws in the UK, if they do.
At the moment, an Asian hornet nest is classified as a risk to human life, and DEFRA, through the MBU, are the people who are tasked with destroying them. If you think you've seen a hornet or a nest, you need to report it. So the best thing to do is to get the Asian Hornet Watch app on your phone. I hope everybody in this room has got that on their phone. It's a really useful thing, but it means you can take a photo from within the app, and your phone will do all that location business, and you can send the evidence to your photo straight to the people who do all the triage. And if they suspect it is an Asian hornet nest, someone will be sent down to destroy it, and that'll be specially trained people, because they really will defend their nest extremely vigorously, and people can end up with multiple stings by inadvertently getting near a nest. So please don't try and do that yourself. They can be really quite dangerous. So get the Asian Hornet Watch app on your phone. If you've got a local Asian Hornet team, you can always contact them for advice, but just report it. Don't make any attempt yourself. Someone's asked about the collective purchase of the Trap-It, and we got it for £50. It might mean £50 at 40 pence instead of £67 10 pence for 5 litres. So we saved about £17 a 5 litre container. That was a really good price. Somebody here has said that their Welsh friend is selling the cones. I think that's for the guard. I don't know if that's for guard apis or for the crate traps. But if you look now on the internet, there are things coming around, and guard apis themselves, you can just buy the end bits and make it up yourself with a piece of Phoenix.
Yeah.
That was me.
Thanks.
Hi, Rich.
Hi, Kev.
Gruffy's selling me cones from Anel for about £2.
If you log on to Gwynedd Griffith Honey, you'll find it there.
Okay.
Yeah. And he does the Trap-It as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Right, just having a look.
Just to say, everybody, before I forget, I said I'd mention this. Somerset beekeepers are organising a Asian Hornet Day study day on the 6th of January. There'll be loads of things that Lynn will tell you about, but it's a really good in-depth day. So please try and book for that. There's only 300 places. You'll need to reserve a place. You'll learn a lot by going, and there'll be some really good people there that will broaden your mind about the whole issue. So if you can turn up there on that day, it's going to be in Bridgewater, if that's anywhere near you. Try and book through the group. It's just gone live, Lynn, hasn't it? About the day.
That beekeepers website. But yeah, do come along. Thanks for that bit of publicity there, Richard. We had hoped to have Richard with us in person, but sadly he's swanning off to America or somewhere, so he won't. We've got lots of different
committed elsewhere, but unfortunately, but
yeah, and practical workshops on tracking and monitoring and how to record things, and it's all from very experienced people. So put the link up, and let me just see if there's any other questions. There's a link there to BBK resources. Somebody's asking if there's a visible difference between a worker and a queen.
It's interesting. In the spring, yes, and in the spring, the first workers are actually a little bit discolored. So you'll see an Asian hornet and you'll see it land, and it'll be often quite small and, like we'd say, puny. Like, what is that? And what it is, that's the first one that she's raised, but she's so desperate to get them out there raising or foraging for her. She'll carry on foraging, but the first actual Asian hornet workers are actually kind of like not really up to it. They haven't got their color. They're not really well formed, but they do their job. But in the summer, you get drones. We've just seen that, and they're actually markedly smaller. They're probably a third less in length. They can be quite puny, the drones. As I say, if you log on the Asian Hornet group, Jersey Asian Hornet group, there's actually a video of a queen mating with a drone on a trapit tray. And we think it's just because it's the end of the season. It was just like this kind of mass release, and this drone is mating with a queen, but it's the only one we've ever seen actually mate.
Yeah,
I think you may have just lost me a moment there, but so it's interesting. So there's so much to see on the Facebook page of the Jersey Asian Hornet group. You can pick up tons of info on that, and I believe they will. Is it Alistair Christie's going to be coming to the workshop day? He's like the States of Jersey coordinator for the Asian Hornet group, and he works with all the other people around him, but he'll be there at that group. So they really know their stuff, and they've learned so much by just working on this issue. It's really good.
Yeah, thanks. So somebody's asked a really important question. Are our standard bee suits Asian Hornet sting proof, or do you need a different suit?
Your standard bee suits are totally not. I'll make that absolutely clear. They're not Asian Hornet sting proof, okay? However, if you want to try and, we're talking about nests and not touching them, do not try and tackle an Asian Hornet nest, no matter what size, on your own. You will be absolutely mullered to pieces. And don't forget, Asian Hornets have no barb on their sting. They can sting you multiple times with multiple amounts of venom, and they will keep on stinging. But my point here is, if you find a really small nest that's just like the primary nest, and you want to do just the thing on it, just to get rid of it, if you want to wait till the queens come back, just puff a little bit of insect spray into the open cone, and that's the end of it. It's all you have to do. But put your bee suit on, just in case. You never know. But what you need to do is put your bee suit on top of a fleece. Give yourself some depth, so that if it did sting you, it's going to only be one sting, because it's one hornet, hopefully one queen hornet. It's unlikely you'll get stung. But what I'm trying to say is that is the limit you go to, unless you got the full suit. You can buy, I think, from I have to be careful here, but I actually think that BB Wear do that suit. They do a really good hornet suit that's actually proven to be really good. But it's like everything else, it's another thing to buy that I wouldn't expect people to buy just because they heard they got Asian hornets around. Don't go down that road. But it is a good bee suit as well, and it's got such thick layers that it will resist hornet stings. So it's something to consider. But do not tackle an Asian hornet's nest of any size after it's gone past the primary stage, because you will regret it. I can tell you now, you will regret it.
It's not worth it. That's what DEFRA's job is.
Yep.
So somebody's made a thing here about we cannot legally trap in the UK, and we can trap because the NBU are actually asking us to put out Asian hornet traps in our apiaries at different times of year. The trapping is okay. It's the releasing, because they don't want you to release a non-native species into the environment, even if it was there in the first place. So trapping is something that the NBU do recommend for certain times of year in certain situations. Okay, so I think we're going to leave it there. And what we're going to do just before we thank Richard very much is we're going to have a break of 5 minutes or so to get yourself a drink. And then we'll come back into bee chat, which is just informal talk about bees or about the presentation tonight or something. But I'd like now to just say thank you so much to Rich. It's been absolutely a fantastic evening. There's all sorts of comments saying how brilliant it has been. Really, really useful. So thank you, everybody. Can you unmute yourself so we can show Richard our appreciation?
Thanks a lot.
Very much, Richard. Brilliant.
Yeah, Richard.
Amazing.
Thank you, Richard.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
Great presentation again.
Thank you.
Heard you on the Irish beekeepers a couple of years ago.
Thank you. Well, I hope you get something out of it. I hope you can, as I said, I don't know all the answers. I just hope that we can all share something for the common cause and get some results at the end of it. I still think in the UK, you've got a slim chance of containing it. But if they, I know friends of mine that live near the New Forest and stuff like that. If it gets in there and gets loose, that's another ball game. But who knows? We just got to do the best we can.
Right. I'm just